Hey, boys and girls, I'm going to share a part of chapter 3 for Joey Pigza Swallowed the Key. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Okay, should work. Okay, so let me see if I can move this so that the book in chapter 3 is easy for you guys to see. Okay, there it is. Handful. You could see the author decided to put the ending of this word upside down. Okay, so here we go. Over the summer, there was a big meeting about me at school. Mom came home very serious and sent me to my room while she read my file. After she read it, she opened my door and sat down on the edge of the bed. She said I should have been kept behind and given extra help, but no teacher wanted to risk getting me 2 years in a row. I guess I can't blame them, she sighed. You are a handful at times. I don't get how they think I'm such a pain, I said to her. And I didn't, because most of the time I wasn't even in the classroom. I was in the principal's office, or with the nurse, or I was helping out in the library or cafeteria, or running laps out on the playground. It wasn't like I was a pain all day long. Like when it rained, the teachers all asked me to run out to the parking lot and roll up their windows. I didn't hear them complain when I came back dripping wet, or if a stack of new supplies was dropped off and I was in the office. Then I always helped move them into the storeroom and received an awesome kid stamp on my hand, not a pain in the neck kid stamp. Plus, I was famous for snatching flies right out of the air, killing all the classroom spiders, and making sure the white mice were always in their cage. I'll bet helpful things like that were not written down in my file. I know I'm not perfect, but I didn't think it was fair that they told me one thing and wrote down another. Hearing stuff like that about me makes me sad, I said to Mom. Well, it should, she replied. But this year we can start over. The school wants me to take you down to the doctor and get you fixed up. Then she reached out and grabbed me and kissed me all over my face, and I had to close my eyelids, otherwise she would kiss me right on the eyeballs. Mrs. Maxey had also read my file. When I arrived in her class, she assigned me my seat and said that she was going to give me a fair chance to show just how good I could be. And all that first day, she kept glancing at me with the I got my eye on you look. I was used to people keeping an eye on me, especially after last year when a special counselor was called in to follow. You see that? Yeah. To follow me everywhere. He gave me tests and kept sending reports home to Grandma, which she just called junk mail and threw it in the trash. I had taken my special meds at my breakfast, and they were working good. So I was mostly sitting still, looking right back into Mrs. Maxey's eyes and shouting the answers when we did our math drills. Before lunch, my seat felt like any old hard seat, and I felt like an old kid. But after lunch, I felt as if I was sitting on a giant spring, and it was all I could do to keep it from launching me head first up into the ceiling. My morning pill was supposed to last all day, but it gave out on me. I gripped the bottom of my chair and held tight and watched the second hand on the clock sweeping around and around. And it wasn't that the important stuff Mrs. Maxey had to say went in one ear and out the other. It was that it didn't go in at all, but just bounced off. And when the bell rang, I loosened my grip and blasted off for the door. But Mrs. Maxey was waiting for me. "Not so fast, Joey," she said, and snagged the back of my shirt collar as I ran by. "We need to talk." That's when she sat me back down and told me about her rules. I had to stay in my seat, she said. No running, jumping, or kicking. Keep my hands on top of my desk. I wasn't allowed to look over my shoulder. No touching the person in front of me. No fidgeting and no drawing on myself. And I absolutely wasn't allowed to say anything until I raised my hand and was called on. She had all the rules printed out on a little white note card. "Now, these are my basic rules," she said to me, and taped them firmly to the upper corner of my desktop. "They apply to everyone in the class. I make no exceptions. So if you work by these rules and keep your mind on your studies, then you and I will not have any problems." Problem was, I wasn't listening. She had on bright red nail polish, and I couldn't get my eyes off the way her fingers tapped on my desktop and were leaving tiny half moon dents in the wood. And the next day, I sure didn't remember a thing she said. And by lunchtime, my meds had worn off again, and I was spinning around in my chair like it was the Mad Hatter's teacup ride at the church carnival. "Joey," Mrs. Maxey said, "will you come up to my desk, please?" I did. I stood before her and hopped from foot to foot as if I had to be. I'm going to read that sentence again because I kind of like to hear the whole sentence flow. So if I mess up, I stop and I reread. I did. I stood before her and hopped from foot to foot as if I had to pee. "You're losing it, Joey," she whispered, and set one hand on my shoulder to settle me down. "Remember the rules?" "Rules?" I asked, kind of lost. "Didn't we have a talk yesterday?" she asked. "I'm a little antsy," I said. "I get this way and I need to do stuff. My grandma used to give me a broom and make me sweep the sidewalk all the way around the block." Mrs. Maxey shook her head back and forth. "Well, we already have a janitor," she said, "but I've got something you can help me with." She gave me a box of used pencils to sharpen. Everyone else was doing some old social studies handout about presidents. When I got to skip it and just sharpen pencils, our class president, Maria Dombrowski, gave me a look. I figured she was jealous because in less than a week, I was already the teacher's pet and got to do all the fun stuff. I just crossed my eyes and kept going. One moment, I realized I have to reshare so that it doesn't. Sorry, just want to reshare it there. Okay, I think it should come back now. Oh, there we are. Good. I know it froze a little bit. I just crossed my eyes and kept going. I stuck the first pencil in the sharpener and began to turn the crank. I love the sound of the wood and to turn and wood and lead being ground down. Okay, so I'm going to read that section of this paragraph again. I stuck the first pencil in the sharpener and began to turn the crank. I loved the sound of the wood and lead being ground down. I lowered my nose to just over the sharpener and sniffed the clean smell of wood shavings, which smelled like the inside of my mom's blanket chest where I used to hide from grandma, then pop up and scare her bloodless. I just kept turning the crank and pushing in the pencil, and finally I had ground down to an inch above the eraser. I pulled it out and checked the tip. Sharp as a needle. I put it in the box and got another and another to grind it down. When I finished that, I found a couple of pieces of chalk and sharpened those down so that when I stuck the flat end up between my upper lip and gum, they hung down like fangs. Then I saw some popsicle sticks on the art cart that were used to make paper puppets. I made sure Mrs. Maxey wasn't looking, then grabbed one and stuck it in the sharpener. I began to turn the crank, but it didn't turn so well, and finally it jammed up and I couldn't get the stick out. I nervously glanced at Mrs. Maxey, and luckily she was busy stapling all the president's heads on a bulletin board. I yanked at the stick again, but it wasn't stuck real good, and I only ended up with splinters in my hand. I wrapped the bottom of my Pittsburgh Penguins hockey jersey around it and tugged with one hand and turned the crank with the other. The stick came loose, and I stumbled back against an empty desk, and my fangs fell out and rolled across the floor in pieces. Mrs. Maxey looked over at me, and so did everyone else. Joey, she asked, is there a problem? The question made me feel jittery. I picked up my fangs and stood real still. No, Mrs. Maxey, no problem, I said in a small mouse voice. She nodded, then turned back on me. But Maria kept frowning at me, and then she pulled out a little pad from her desk and wrote down four letters. I couldn't see, but figured spelled Joey. As class president, it was Maria's job to make sure everyone had good behavior if Mrs. Maxey would take minutes off our recess time. Brown noser, I thought, and forgot all about her. Boys and girls, we're going to stop here. I am going to have a couple of questions for you to think about and answer. This is halfway, and then the next time I do the video, it'll be the rest of chapter 3 to the end.